Good afternoon. Welcome to News Plus here on Loveworld USA. I'm TGK Andre. Let's take a quick look at the top headline stories this afternoon. The Trump administration and Elon Musk blast the EU after $140 million fine against X. The Supreme Court lets Texas use GOP-favored congressional maps for 2026 elections. The U.S. vaccine panel ends universal hepatitis B shot recommendation for newborns. San Diego weighs $30 million payout over police shooting of teen fleeing gunfire. And the Coast Guard makes a record 20,000-pound cocaine seizure in the Eastern Pacific. And now to the news. Elon Musk and senior Trump administration officials are condemning a $140 million penalty the European Commission imposed on X, accusing the European Union of overreach and attacking free speech. The Commission announced Friday that X had violated transparency rules under the EU's Digital Services Act, prompting Musk to call the fine bull and argue on X that the EU should be abolished and power returned to individual nations. EU regulators say the fine stems from X's alleged non-compliance with transparency obligations, including what they describe as a deceptive blue checkmark system, insufficient transparency in the platform's advertising repository, and failure to provide adequate access to public data for researchers. A Commission spokesperson said the decision is unrelated to content moderation and instead focuses on ensuring European citizens can see who is paying for ads and how the platform labels accounts. Trump administration officials framed the move as a broader challenge to American tech companies and U.S. free speech. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the fine isn't just an attack on X, it's an attack on all American tech platforms and the American people by foreign governments, while Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick argued the DSA is designed to stifle free speech in American tech companies. Vice President J.D. Vance and Republican senators, including Ted Cruz, Eric Schmidt, Rick Scott, and others, urged a tough U.S. response, with some calling for sanctions and warning against allowing European regulators to set speech standards for Americans. The European Commission defended its action by saying X's paid verified status can mislead users because the platform does not meaningfully confirm the identity behind accounts, exposing people to impersonation, fraud, and manipulation. Regulators also said X's advertising library is not sufficiently accessible for outside scrutiny, which they argue is essential for spotting scams, coordinated information operations, and fake ads under the DSA's transparency rules. It's wild to say, but it seems that we're at a point where if the EU is criticizing you for doing something, you're probably doing the right thing. Again, this is the European Union that has now had a consistent track record of punishing the most free speech inducing platforms. Let me remind you, the man of God spoke about this, of course, in your Loveworld, but we have to remember Pavel Durov, the founder of Telegram, who was imprisoned in France for months due to his Telegram platform. Telegram being one of the most secure free speech social media applications that allows you to send messages and interact with others in groups. Because Mr. Durov didn't regulate his platform well enough to, again, keep criminals off it, he, who again wasn't promoting criminal activity when it was reported, the accounts, spam accounts or criminal accounts were shut down when they were reported, but because the founder of the app and the owner of the app wasn't, again, making it very difficult for those who just wanted to practice free speech to practice free speech, he was jailed. Not sued, jailed, until he made changes to the app and its regulations in the EU. So now when you see them come after Musk, it shouldn't surprise you. This is their modus operandi. It's their MO. The EU and UK, although they performed their Brexit, have been the biggest detractors to free speech over the last decade. They want to know what you're saying, when you're saying it, and how you said it, and if they don't like what you say, they want the ability to be able to send their Gestapo, sorry, I meant to send the police after you. I mean, if I was in the EU saying this right now, there'd probably be a bunch of policemen waiting right outside the door. That's legitimately how concerning it's becoming. So when you hear things like this, of course, fortunately, we're in a place a beautiful country like America where freedom of speech is literally one of the first, not literally one of, it is the first government protected right for the public. Despite what some Democrats may have tried to have said, despite what Facebook, Meta, and the Biden administration tried to do during the COVID-19 pandemic, free speech is still allowed here. So it's good to see the senators and the president and Elon Musk fighting and taking a stance for what they believe is right. And I do hope those retaliatory sanctions come very soon, because we can't just have free speech in the country because we're in a global society. We need free speech to be free around the world. And like the man of God has said, free speech isn't just free when it favors you. It should be free so that even things that go against you or insult you are there in the open. And then you have a battle of wits in the public space and you let the people decide what to believe. It's not your job, it's not the job of a government to allow people to hear only what they want them to hear, what they believe that they should hear. Because then that goes beyond governing. Now that is censorship of the highest order. You're literally controlling their perception, and you're not giving them the ability to make decisions and choices for themselves. And what did God give us above all things, if not the choice to choose and choose wisely? The U.S. Supreme Court has allowed Texas to use its new congressional map in the 2026 elections, pausing a lower court ruling that found the lines likely discriminated on the basis of race. In a divided decision issued Thursday, the justices granted an emergency request from Texas Republicans, who argued that candidate qualifying is already underway and that blocking the map would disrupt the March primaries. In an unsigned statement, the majority signaled skepticism toward the lower court's findings that race was a predominant factor in the map's design, saying Texas lawmakers had pursued avowedly partisan goals. The decision freezes a 2-1 ruling by a 3-judge panel that concluded the 2025 map diluted the political power of Black and Latino voters and eliminated 5 of 9 coalition districts where minorities together outnumbered white voters. That panel had also noted that the numbers of districts where minorities are a majority of voting-age citizens dropped from 16 to 14 under the new lines. Justice Elena Kagan, writing a dissent for the 3 liberal justices, argued the court should not have intervened, warning that the ruling ensures that many Texas citizens, for no good reason, will be placed in electoral districts because of their race. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton praised this day as a defense of the state's right to draw districts that reflect its political makeup, calling the plan the Big Beautiful Map. Governor Greg Abbott said the ruling means Texas is now officially and legally more red, while Democratic National Committee Chair Ken Martin denounced the decision as allowing a rigged, racially gerrymandered map to take effect. The Texas dispute is part of a broader national redistricting battle tied to efforts to shore up a narrow Republican House majority. Texas was the first state to enact a mid-decade map under Trump's push, followed by GOP-drawn plans in Missouri and North Carolina that added additional Republican-leaning seats, while Democrats in California advanced their own map expected to produce more Democratic districts. The Supreme Court is also considering a separate case from Louisiana that could further narrow the use of race in drawing districts under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, a ruling that could influence future legal challenges to maps like Texas's. Let's take a look.
Republican redistricting efforts from the legislative session were very successful.
This year, state lawmakers redrew Texas's congressional districts, aiming to add 5 seats likely to favor Republicans in 2026. A federal court blocked the map in November, calling it a likely racial gerrymander.
Well, the lower court said that it hurts minority voters, and this again is showing that the Voting Rights Act has gotten progressively weaker over time.
On Thursday, the U.S. Supreme Court paused that ruling, allowing the new map to be used for next year's elections. Justice Samuel Alito ruled that it was, quote, indisputable that the motivation for Texas's redistricting was partisan advantage, which has been ruled as permissible by the High Court.
When you read the news or you hear the news today, a lot of the stories may shock you as seemingly radical. What you have to understand now is that under this Trump administration, he's done away with almost entirely Washington bureaucracy and bureaucracy across the nation. These tactics to, again, do mid-decade redistricting have been available, but due to the term I'm looking for is party pleasantry, meaning that, both sides who are in opposition to each other know that they can only take it this far before things might get nasty, have decided not to do these things while they've been in power. Now, Trump has come in and just said, hey, well, just because people don't do it doesn't mean that it's not legal to do it. Which is why, again, we've seen a whole bunch of executive orders. We've seen a whole lot of acts and laws that had precedent being used because he was like, well, just because people don't do it doesn't mean that it can't be done. This isn't legal precedence stopping me from doing it. It was just bureaucracy. So this is exactly what you're seeing with mid-decade redistricting. It's been available for Democratic and Republican states to use it alike. But now Trump is just putting the onus on, hey, I know that it's usually not done because it's considered politically sanctimonious, but this is a war that we're engaging in, a war for the soul of this nation. So we're going to go ahead and do it. And now you're seeing the results, of course, states going to court, and it's going to set up how the next winner of the presidential election plays. It's going to set up how you're going to see states, Republicans and Democrats, because now the Democrats are doing it in California as well, look at the law. And you're going to see America do things that have never been done before in political history. Be excited. Now, in further news, San Diego officials are considering a $30 million settlement with the family of 16-year-old Kanoa Wilson, who was fatally shot by a police officer in January 2025. A resolution authorizing the agreement has been placed on the city's council agenda for Tuesday. If approved, it would be among the largest payouts in a police-involved death case, surpassing the $27 million settlement Minneapolis reached with the family of George Floyd. According to surveillance and body-worn camera footage cited in court filings, Wilson, who was black, was running away from an individual who pulled a gun and opened fire at a downtown train station on January 28th. As Wilson exited the station, he encountered San Diego police officer Daniel Gold. The family's federal lawsuit says Gold fired 2 shots instantly without any warning as Wilson ran past him, striking the teenager in the upper body. Wilson was later pronounced dead at the UC San Diego Health Medical Center. In a statement quoted by local media, family attorney Nick Rowley called the shooting a catastrophic failure of policing, arguing that Wilson was not a threat and not a suspect. The complaint further alleges that Gold announced San Diego police only after Wilson had been shot and fallen to the ground, and accuses the city and officer of acts of racial violence in shooting the teen in the back as he tried to reach safety. An agenda notice posted Friday said the proposed settlement would be paid from the city's public liability fund. The agreement would resolve the family's wrongful death and civil rights claims if the council votes to approve it. The officer and the city have not admitted wrongdoing as part of the proposed payout. Let's take a look.
I got shots fired. Again, I got shots fired.
Officer Daniel Gold raced toward the sound of gunfire. He practically collided with 16-year-old Kanoa Wilson, who was running from it.
This was a life. His life was priceless. His parents lost their only son.
Nick Crowley is one of the attorneys representing the Wilson family. He says negotiating this case came down to this.
We will take this case to trial, put it in front of a San Diego jury, and the verdict that I will tell that jury to give will exceed $100 million. And if you want to take a gamble with that, then let's go.
This should be a simple and shut case. I mean, again, there is video evidence on the police body cam. Wilson was a tragic victim of police incompetence. And this doesn't mean that all police are incompetent, but again, we understand that being a part of a police force is a high-stakes, stressful job that calls for split-second decision-making. But that is also why there is a dedicated police academy and why police officers typically are given and granted the respect and, again, space to do what they do, because we understand that this is a high-stakes, stressful situation in which split-second decisions can be a matter of life and death, safety, or danger. But in the situation, there was an actual shooter. So striking an individual who was fleeing, meaning that they are no longer with their back turned. So they're not looking to advance towards you aggressively or at all. It's just a case of incorrect decision making. Because again, at that point, that's why tasers exist, to stop fleeing individuals, which would allow you to neutralize the threat. Although how much of a threat can a threat be if they're running away from the incident and you can't identify if there's any weaponry on them? But that's exactly why non-lethal force exists, to allow you to neutralize the threat until you gain more information about the situation, not to then use lethal force immediately, again on a suspect, and I can't stress this enough, who is running away from the situation. And again, you can't even label them a suspect because in a shooting, everybody's first instinct would be to flee from the scene. So would everybody be a suspect? It's a tragedy that occurred in San Francisco, and hopefully the council does rule in favor of the family so that they can be settled, and this unfortunate matter can be put to rest once and for all. A U.S. vaccine advisory panel has voted 8-3 to end the long-standing recommendation that all newborns receive the hepatitis B vaccine at birth, shifting instead to individual-based decision-making for babies born to mothers who test negative for the virus. The Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, recently reconstituted by Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., adopted the change following tense debate and strong objections from public health experts who warned that delaying the shot could increase infections. Under the new guidance, infants whose mothers test negative will no longer be advised to receive the vaccine at birth, and their first dose should be given no earlier than 2 months of age, a provision several committee members opposed. The panel reaffirmed that newborns of mothers who test positive for hepatitis B should still receive the birth dose. Critics, including physicians on the panel, warned that the move could undermine decades of progress against hepatitis B. The birth dose recommendation, in place since 1991, has been credited with preventing roughly 90,000 deaths. Doctors argue that relying solely on maternal testing leaves gaps, noting that some women lack consistent access to screening or may receive false negative results. The decision drew swift criticism from some lawmakers, including Senator Bill Cassidy, a physician who previously supported Kennedy's confirmation despite concerns about his vaccine stances. He called the vote a mistake, stressing that the vaccine is safe, effective, and essential for preventing chronic liver disease. The CDC's acting director must approve the revised guidelines, which are not expected to affect insurance coverage for the vaccine. Public health experts warned the change may fuel vaccine hesitancy and reverse gains made over 3 decades in reducing childhood hepatitis B infections. Watch this.
Today, a major reversal from the CDC, an advisory committee voting to no longer recommend the hepatitis B vaccine for newborns of moms that test negative. The reversal putting an end to a recommendation that has been in place for over 30 years. It was voted on by a panel put in place by HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has long pushed vaccine conspiracies.
It's sad that there are people on this committee who didn't bring up any of the real-world benefits.
Former CDC Chief of Vaccines, Dimitri Daskalakis, resigned from the committee earlier this year.
I think that what you're seeing is ideology supplanting science, conspiracy supplanting process.
He slammed the move, saying it will create confusion.
Access remains the same, but creates doubt, confusion, and will result in more children getting hepatitis B. And ultimately then, getting chronic hepatitis B, 90% of them will if they're infected, and 25% of them will die early.
This is a situation where you have to understand typically why they're pushing it back. The way that, again, you might ask, how does a baby get hepatitis B, is typically through saliva contact. People sometimes like to kiss newborns or they like to kiss children, and if a person, a guest, a family member has hepatitis B, it gets passed on through saliva. So when the CDC is saying that, hey, you don't have to give it to the child at birth, you can wait up to 2 months or you can just choose not to, it's not necessarily that they're saying, okay, well, this doesn't make sense at all. It's just more so that, again, it is up to parental decision, but just if you don't want to give your child the vaccine, be careful around who your child has the ability to interact with, especially where salival contact is imminent. That's literally the crux of this whole story, because again, once the child passes a year, this basically becomes of non-effect, pretty much. It's that first year of the child's life where this is the most prevalent, or the hepatitis B transfer is the most prevalent in happening. So again, they're not banning it, they're not saying don't take it, they're just pushing the schedule further by 2 months, 60 days. And it's causing all of this hullabaloo, when again, it's not impossible in 60 days, again, especially if the parents don't have it, for the child just to avoid, again, salival contact with somebody who has hepatitis B. They speak about false negatives, maybe leading parents to be against their child not taking it. But in the same situation, you can just easily tell guests, tell visitors, because the parents would know, hey, just don't touch our child with your saliva. Please don't kiss the baby. This is a newborn, and the situation goes away. If anything, this may even help the baby stave off some infections, as there would be less salival contact with the baby in its first few months of life. So it depends on how you look at it, but the way that the experts are coming at it, they're making it seem like all Earth has broken loose with the situation when it's clearly not the case. We will take a break, and when we return, more stories will follow. Don't go anywhere.
In a world that's always moving, staying connected to the right resources makes all the difference. Welcome to the Loveworld App Store, the digital home of everything that powers your journey in the Loveworld nation. Here, discovery is simple and meaningful. With our categories section, you can explore a wide range of apps designed to enrich your spirit.
I'm praying specially for you. You that have been sick, you need a miracle.
On the Loveworld App Store, you can access all your favorite apps, such as Healing School app, King's Chat, PCDL, Rhapsody app, Love Tunes, ESPYs, Loveworld Worship, Herald app, Alpha TV, King's View, C-Flix, Hello Loveworld, PCDL for kids, King's Conference, and so much more. Each application is created to serve a unique purpose and bring you closer to a life of impact. Explore My App feature, where your most valued tools are gathered in one convenient place. It's your personalized hub, ready whenever you are. The Loveworld App Store is more than a collection of apps. It's a vibrant ecosystem built to inspire faith, foster connection, and equip you for impact. Visit www.lwappstore.com to download the app on your device. Explore a world where purpose meets technology. Loveworld App Store. All your world in one place.
Welcome back. The U.S. Coast Guard says it has seized more than 20,000 pounds of cocaine from a single vessel in the Eastern Pacific, marking the largest at-sea interdiction in nearly 18 years. The bus was carried out by the crew of the cutter Monroe, based in Alameda, California, during counter-narcotics operations under Operation Pacific Viper, an initiative by the Trump administration to curb drug trafficking through Pacific maritime routes. Video released by the Coast Guard shows a helicopter and surface assets pursuing a high-speed go-fast vessel with several people on board. According to officials, the helicopter crew disabled the non-compliant boat, allowing the Monroe to arrive on scene and seize the cocaine. Authorities did not provide details on the status or disposition of those aboard the intercepted vessel. In a statement, the Coast Guard said its maritime fighting force is leading America's drug interdiction operations, highlighting efforts to keep large quantities of illicit narcotics from reaching U.S. communities. The operation is part of a broader push to target trafficking networks operating from Central and South America into the United States via sea routes. The recorded seizure comes as regional partners also report major drug interdictions. Earlier in the week, Colombian authorities announced the capture of more than 7 tons of cocaine from boats in the Caribbean, valued at over $340 million, with 11 suspects taken into custody. We're seeing, again, these are figures, we're seeing 20,000 pounds, so that's 10 tons. We're seeing 7 tons. Again, this is within a week. This is just what's being caught by the Coast Guard. This is just what's being caught by the United States military. This should serve as a signal to how much, again, how much narcotics is being pushed into the United States. Because, of course, they have long-standing and long-stretching networks. So when you see Trump's push to, or when you see Pete Hegseth and, of course, the Ministry of Wars, the Department of War's push to apprehend or neutralize these targets, you have to understand that the American drug problem isn't something that's starting internally. It's coming from the outside, or it's being burgeoned by the outside, and the Trump administration is saying, hey, we want to take care of our people at home. First, we need to get rid of the negative influences. The countries that these drugs keep on coming from aren't doing a good enough job. If you remember in February and March, one of the first reasons that Trump even thought and implemented tariffs against Canada and Mexico was because they weren't doing enough to curb the drug epidemic at their borders. The safety of the American people has been his first and foremost priority. And now we're seeing him take it up a notch because things have gotten better, but they haven't gotten better fast enough. And there has to be drastic measures taken to show that, hey, your life is at danger when you bring these boats from your shores and you try to make it onto our waters. This is no longer, if you get caught, you might be able to turn around or make your way back or, kind of find a way to divert from the situation. And it's almost incredible to say this, but Pete Hegseth and the Department of War have pretty much put out a DOA notice on narco-terrorism or on narcotic smugglers, saying, hey, now when you do this, it's not either you get the money or you risk a lifetime in jail or decades in jail. It's now that every shipment you attempt to make, your life is now officially on the line. It's either jail, life, or success. Sorry, it's either jail, death, or success, not just jail or success. There's now a third, more costlier option that there is no undo button from. So that should help you understand why the aggression has gone up. There's now a third factor that should go into the minds of these narcotics traffickers when they try to bring drugs illegally across our border. And now we'll take a look at some of the stories that made the headlines this week. A federal appeals court has upheld a ruling disqualifying President Donald Trump's nominee, Alina Habba, from serving as a U.S. attorney for New Jersey. The Third U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals found that her installation violated the Federal Vacancies Reform Act, affirming the lower court's determination that the administration's workaround to place her in the job was not lawful. President Donald Trump nominated Habba to the post earlier this year, but the Senate did not confirm her. After district court judges refused to appoint her, the administration withdrew her nomination and reassigned her to a lower role that would make her the acting U.S. attorney. Judges called the maneuver an unprecedented personnel tactic, and the appellate panel agreed, ruling that the Vacancies Act barred someone nominated from the same office for serving in an acting capacity. The three-judge panel said Habba could not automatically assume the position because only the first assistant in place at the time of a vacancy qualifies under the law. The court added that the Attorney General could not circumvent the statute by delegating full prosecutorial authority to her, a move it said violated the exclusivity provisions of the Vacancies Act. The decision is expected to have national implications as other interim prosecutors were appointed through similar methods. The ruling comes shortly after another court blocked the administration's chosen prosecutor in Virginia, marking a series of legal setbacks for President Donald Trump's efforts to install his preferred candidates in key federal posts. Supporters argue the judiciary is resisting needed changes to the Justice Department, while critics claim the administration has pushed legal boundaries to place loyalists in top roles. Watch this.
Habba previously served as one of President Donald Trump's personal lawyers, and the president nominated her to this role. She was not confirmed by the Senate, so the Trump administration attempted to install her another way. A district court found that the appointment violated a federal act, and the Third Circuit Court of Appeals upheld that decision this morning. This could end up in the Supreme Court. And remember, in recent weeks, we saw something very similar with Lindsey Halligan, who was appointed in the Eastern District of Virginia. Still no response yet from Habba or the Trump administration.
We discussed this briefly earlier on the show. The Trump administration is doing away with the traditional idea of bureaucracy. We're seeing him push legal boundaries, as the critics have said, because, again, that's what boundaries are there for. A lot of politicians before have been fine with maintaining the status quo, maybe adjusting it a bit, but we're seeing Trump pull out almost all the stops to get what he wants. We're seeing a man, again, who didn't grow up through a political facade while building his political career, and he's coming into office and saying, hey, it's always been looked at this way, but this way is just as viable. So, of course, it creates a bit of shock in the media. It creates a bit of shock in the political stratosphere, mind you. As the judges have said, it worked because, again, it wasn't illegal the way he did it. It was just that there's a legality of it that can be challenged because, again, it's very unusual. The fact that he was able to appoint her shows that he was able to appoint Alina Habba. Of course, he did something similar with Lindsey Halligan in Virginia. It shows that there is a loophole that just most people politically would just choose rather not to exploit. But Trump, as we've seen all the way since January, saying he has a mandate that he needs to get through, and he's willing to take whatever measures are possible and necessary, whether it's enabling acts all the way from the 1800s or from the 1900s that have been used once and never again. He is willing to comb through with a fine-tooth comb every law book from United States history to find precedent or to find maneuvers that support his position. I'm telling you, folks at home, we have never seen a president move like this before. This is somebody who is, to put it in a gamer's perspective or in a footballer's perspective, this is someone who has read the rule book and knows exactly how far he can step before he's offside, or how far he can go before the referee has to call a charge or a travel or a penalty. And he's doing it with masterful precision. And it's up to the courts, it's up to the politicians to tell them where the boundaries are. Because Trump is showing that he's going to push this as far as he can until he has to stop. What an administration. The Trump administration's new rules for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program took effect Monday. Adults up to age 64 must now work, train, or volunteer at least 80 hours per month to qualify. The rules apply to new applicants and those up for recertification. The changes are projected to reduce SNAP enrollment by about 2.4 million over the next decade, potentially saving taxpayers billions. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins highlighted widespread misuse, including deceased individuals still receiving benefits and people collecting assistance in multiple states. All participants must now reapply for benefits. The administration is also blocking illegal immigrants from accessing federal programs, including tax credits like the Earned Income Tax Credit. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent emphasized that benefits will be preserved for U.S. citizens. Supporters say the reforms restore accountability and cut fraud in the program. They argue the changes ensure aid goes to Americans who genuinely need it, rather than being misused or handed out without oversight. Let's take a look.
18 years old will now have to follow a 20-hour-a-week or 80-hour-a-month work requirement, which includes either a job or participation in a job training program or volunteer program. Those who don't follow the requirements will be limited to 3 months of SNAP benefits over the course of a 3-year period. According to the USDA, the new restrictions would also remove exemptions for people experiencing homelessness, veterans, and young adults aging out of the foster care system. The work requirement changes come as part of Trump administration's Big Beautiful Bill, which was signed into law in July and aims at tightening requirements for people who do receive SNAP benefits. According to the Congressional Budget Office, this work requirement change could impact about 1.1 million people over the next 9 years nationwide. Here in Orange County, 310,000 people rely on SNAP benefits. This could impact about 42,000 people.
So just to clarify, the requirements to be on SNAP now mean that you either have to work, train, or volunteer 80 hours a month. That's not 80 hours bi-weekly, that's 80 hours a month. So let's do the math on that. That's 20 hours a week, 40 hours bi-weekly. The normal work week is 40 hours. So let's even do the math further. If you go through a 5-day work period per week, that is volunteering, training, or working 4 hours a day. That's 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. That's 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. That's 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. That somebody either has to work, meaning that they're getting paid and contributing through taxes to the U.S. economy, train, meaning that, again, they're upscaling, they're improving themselves, which should eventually pay dividends to the U.S. economy and society, or volunteer, meaning, again, that they're giving back to society and that they're contributing. This is pretty much Trump's version of saying, hey, we don't mind assisting, but we also don't want to have people who can just sit around and do nothing, while the people who are actually working, who may even barely be able to not qualify, or those who even qualify and are on SNAP, help your benefits through taxes. So you can have somebody who's on SNAP, who's working, but they're not working enough or they're not getting paid enough so they can still receive SNAP benefits, whose tax dollars from that job are now going towards SNAP beneficiaries who aren't working, aren't training, or aren't volunteering. Does that seem right? If anything, look at it from the perspective of the SNAP recipients whose taxes are paying for SNAP recipients who aren't working. And when you see it like that, the president's position starts to make sense. 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. Simple as that. 80 hours, which is half as much as what people usually work in a regular month, to either work, train, or volunteer. I mean, either way, you're giving either to yourself and earning income, to yourself through training and bettering yourself, or to your community through volunteering. There's nothing negative about this position. It's just whether you're actually willing to work a bit to get the benefits. Because some of the people who are getting those benefits are also paying for your benefits while you're doing nothing. There's nothing more to say. We'll be right back with more news. Be sure to stay tuned.
It's easy to set up, quick to start, and packed with value. Smarter streaming starts here with the Alpha TV Stick. Just plug and stream anytime, anywhere. Discover a curated lineup of content designed to inspire, live broadcasts and global events, inspirational films and series, children's programming, healing and teaching sessions, all on demand.
With millions of downloads worldwide, the Alpha TV app is transforming lives across the globe. And now, we're on a mission to reach 1 billion downloads of the Alpha TV app, and you can be part of it. Join the global wave with 1 billion Alpha TV app downloads worldwide. Bring the higher life into every home. Order your Alpha TV Stick today and experience smarter streaming. Alpha, the higher life is here.
Welcome back. House Republicans have opened a new investigation into Minnesota Governor Tim Walz over his administration's handling of a pandemic-era food aid program that federal prosecutors say became the largest COVID-19 fraud scheme in the country. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer from Kentucky said the panel will examine why, despite early warnings and whistleblower complaints, state officials allegedly failed to stop widespread fraud tied to the nonprofit Feeding Our Future. Comer accused Walz of negligence and claimed criminals, including individuals with alleged ties to Somali terrorists, stole nearly $1 billion intended to feed low-income children. Federal prosecutors have so far charged at least 78 defendants and say roughly $300 million in taxpayer funds were diverted through Feeding Our Future and related organizations. Minnesota education officials say the nonprofit and its partners submitted more than $500 million in claims, and critics argue the true losses may approach $1 billion. Nearly 500 employees at the Minnesota Department of Human Services have publicly accused the Walz administration of ignoring fraud warnings and retaliating against internal whistleblowers, including by sidelining oversight bodies such as the Office of the Legislative Auditor. The Treasury Department has also launched a separate federal probe into whether any Minnesota tax dollars connected to the scheme were diverted overseas to Somalia and possibly to the terrorist group Al-Shabaab, an allegation not reflected in the current criminal indictments. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said his department is moving quickly to determine whether funds meant for public assistance were misused to support terrorism, vowing to share findings as the investigation progresses. The Justice Department has described the Feeding Our Future case as the largest pandemic relief fraud prosecution to date, but has not confirmed any terrorism link. Walz, a Democrat, has defended his administration's response while acknowledging the seriousness of the scandal. He said last week that those who exploited Minnesota's generous social programs are going to go to jail, and argued it is wrong to demonize an entire community over the actions of some individuals tied to the fraud cases. Speaking on NBC's Meet the Press, Walz said he takes responsibility for backing prosecutions and emphasized that Minnesota remains a well-run state, even as federal and congressional investigators intensify scrutiny of how the alleged fraud was able to spread. This is the man that the Democratic National Committee allowed and championed as a potential future vice president. Folks at home, I say this with the utmost sincerity. I want you to thank God that the election went the way it did. Imagine again, in control of a state, one of 50 states, you let fraud of $300 million, at the minimum, maybe potentially up to $1 billion, occur under your nose, as it was reported by whistleblowers, again, ostracizing the whistleblowers and refusing to take any act against it until it officially became national information. So imagine if the whistle wasn't blown. Those who notified him would have just been there and able to do nothing, as again, these heinous criminals who pretty much took money away from the mouths of children were allowed to get away with it. And then on top of that, there are now allegations that some of those funds were used to fund a criminal organization in Somalia that is responsible for a lot of the asylum claims that Somalis have used to enter America. I say this again, this is the person that the Democratic National Committee in Kamala Harris wanted to be the vice president over all 50 states and U.S. territories. Folks at home, I want you to thank God that the election went the way it did. Because the way it seems, it's almost as if Tim Walz was somehow championing this behavior. Because again, you look at Ilhan Omar, who has said, or you look at the Prime Minister, the former Prime Minister of Somalia, who said publicly in a campaign speech for Ilhan Omar that she does not represent the state of Minnesota, she does not represent the United States or herself, but she represents the interests of the people of Somalia. If anybody said that about any politician in any country outside of the United States, that politician's job would be under media scrutiny. We look at Minnesota Mayor Jacob Frey, who defeated Omar Fatah, a Somali, in the elections a few months ago, and you delve into the situation, and it was apparently a Somali tribe feud that dictated who the next mayor of Somalia, or Freudian slip, that dictated who the next mayor of Minnesota, of Minneapolis, would be. And of course, in his campaign speech, he said that he would work to advance interests of the Somali community, even, of course, speaking Somali in his speech. In recent videos, we've seen him again speaking with Somali leaders, and there's also been, again, photographic evidence of a convicted criminal who fled from Canada decades ago, who was convicted of welfare fraud, taking pictures with Ilhan Omar and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. So again, you have to ask, how far does this go? And why was this allowed to run on for so long with nobody actually taking account for this? Thank you to the whistleblowers. Thank you to those who have boldly spoken up, even though they were, again, ostracized by the Minnesota governor. And thank you to the voters. Because again, we have to thank God ultimately that the presidential election went the way it did. Because Kamala Harris and Tim Walz would have waltzed America into being a laughingstock globally. The Trump administration has dismissed 8 immigration judges working at 26 Federal Plaza in New York City, an action confirmed by the National Association of Immigration Judges. The move follows the firing of another judge who has since sued the Department of Justice, claiming she was targeted for discriminatory reasons rather than performance. Former Judge Tanaya Niemer, who served in Ohio, alleges she was removed because of her gender, dual Lebanese-American citizenship, and prior run for local office as a Democrat. Her lawsuit said she was abruptly dismissed during her probationary period despite earning top performance ratings, calling the administration's actions a rushed effort to purge disfavored civil servants. The firings come as more than 100 immigration judges have been pushed out, reassigned, or resigned under the Department of Government Efficiency's Fork in the Road program. At the same time, the Department of Homeland Security is actively hiring deportation judges, with remote positions offering salaries over $159,000, highlighting a major shift toward rapid immigration enforcement under President Donald Trump. Niemer, escorted out of court upon her dismissal, claims the government has failed to provide a legitimate reason for terminating her. Her attorneys argue the Justice Department is asserting unconstitutional authority to fire federal employees without regard for civil rights protections. She is asking a D.C. court for reinstatement, compensatory damages, and a ruling affirming that her rights were violated as the immigration court backlog surpasses 3.7 million cases. The Trump administration has halted all pending immigration applications, including green cards from 19 countries of concern, following last week's shooting of 2 National Guard members near the White House. A USCIS memo says applicants from nations on the updated travel ban list will face pause reviews while additional vetting procedures are developed. Officials linked the pause to the attack allegedly carried out by an Afghan national who entered the U.S. in 2021. The travel ban list includes Afghanistan, Somalia, Iran, Libya, Yemen, Venezuela, and others. Some naturalization ceremonies for applicants from these countries have also been canceled as part of the broader review. Immigration attorneys say the directives appear to combine formal policy changes with internal instructions that have not been publicly released. They warn of slower processing and increased scrutiny, with potential legal challenges expected. DHS says the measures reflect President Donald Trump's focus on tighter immigration controls, arguing that benefits granted under the prior administration must be reevaluated for security risks. USCIS is expected to issue additional guidance in the coming weeks as the pause remains in effect. Let's take a look.
U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services decided to freeze immigration requests from 19 countries that the Trump administration deems, quote, high risk for national security reasons after an Afghan national critically shot 2 National Guard members in Washington, D.C. last week. In a 4-page memo, the Immigration and Naturalization Agency said all benefit applications filed by foreign nationals from 19 high-risk countries, including Afghanistan, are placed on hold until further notice. All asylum applications, regardless of the applicant's country of nationality, are also paused indefinitely. Joining Afghanistan on the list are Burma, Burundi, Chad, Cuba, the Republic of the Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Laos, Libya, Sierra Leone, Somalia, Sudan, Togo, Turkmenistan, Venezuela, and Yemen. These are the same countries that were included in President Donald Trump's June 4th proclamation for travel restrictions, both full and partial. USCIS says it remains committed to making sure all immigrants who enter the U.S. from countries of concern are not considered threats to national security or the general public. In the wake of the high-profile shooting in the nation's capital, Trump blamed the Biden administration for establishing the Afghan resettlement program that allowed the shooter to enter the U.S. in 2021 without proper vetting. Within 90 days of the memo, USCIS will create a prioritized list of immigrants for review and, if appropriate, refer them to Immigration and Customs Enforcement and other law enforcement agencies.
Again, this is a decision that the Trump administration has taken due to the actions and the effects of the actions of the Biden administration. Trump is shepherding the country. He wants to make sure that his flock are taken care of properly. And unfortunately, there has been some violence. There's been a lot of distractions. I think that's a calm way to put it, from immigrants who may have been vetted improperly. We've seen with the border crisis, we've seen with the Operation FAFO in Florida, how the Florida officials, upon conducting the sting and arresting over 260 people, realized that there were 20 people who entered the country and weren't on their radar. There's just a lot of people who are in the country that the U.S. does not have proper vetting history for. If you file to enter the country legally, you know that typically the background process and the checks and things of that nature take months to years. You may be able to get your work permit, you may be able to get your travel permit within months, but the actual ability to grant you permanent resident status typically takes a year plus, because there's a lot of background information that USCIS and CBP has to collect and collate. So when you're bringing in people who are seeking asylum from countries that are going through a lot of distress, you also have to be careful to ensure that you're not bringing in the distressors themselves, who will then continue to cause distress to those who are trying to flee from them. So this may seem like a sort of harsh punishment because of the effects of the Afghan shooter, but you have to understand that the people who are fleeing don't want the people who they're fleeing from to be able to enter the country with them, because then that defeats the purpose. So Trump isn't just doing this for the Americans, he's doing this for the asylees, again, who have the clear backgrounds, who came in and were vetted the right way, so that you're not also bringing the baby and the bathwater out of the bath. I hope you understand that analogy. And now, let's take a look at the weather update. And to end the news today, a quick recap of the headlines. The Trump administration and Elon Musk blast the EU after $140 million fine against X. The Supreme Court lets Texas use GOP-favored congressional map for 2026 elections. The U.S. vaccine panel ends universal hepatitis B shot recommendation for newborns. San Diego weighs $30 million payout over police shooting of teen fleeing gunfire. And the Coast Guard makes record 20,000-pound cocaine seizure in Eastern Pacific. And that's News Plus for today. Remember to join us same time tomorrow for more. I'm TGK Andre. Good day, and God bless you.